I bought my little XD over. This doesn't normally live here, and it's a little bit neglected, the poor old thing. It's not running too well. I've got to give it a service and tune, and it's a gem of an old thing. So I love this car. My father bought it when I was 12 years old, so we've had it in the family from new. It was missing before. I just want to stick it in, and it doesn't seem to be missing now. Let's bring it in the garage. Yeah, this old bugger's my most valued car. Certainly not the most in terms of monetary value, but I have so many memories of it when I was a child. Of course, Dad bought it, as I said before, when I was in year 7. I was 12 years old. It's the sticker on the air cleaner says 5.8. It's a big light. It's a 302. I put that on because the old 4.9 one had all blistered and cracked and so forth, and I had that one there. We used to wonder about this car actually, because it always went so much better than all the other 302 Falcons. We never knew why. It was a service manager's car. We bought it with 4,000 kilometres on the clock, and I even had an XC GXL 351, and this had run rings around it, and we never knew why it went so well. It always used to get carburetor issues though, and sometimes when you drove it, it felt terribly sluggish. I think it was about 91, around the same time I did the transmission in it. I gave the carburetor to a bloke to overhaul. He'd overhauled hundreds of them. He used to work at Ford where I worked, actually the same place that this car came from when it was new, and he sorted it out. It was always consistent and easier to start after that. But of course now it's getting a little bit tired. Now I am going to take the engine out of this at some stage. I'm going to put a new booster and master on, and also the brake lines are all rusty. I don't like that, so I'm going to give the brakes a complete overhaul. And this engine blows smoke when you start it, so I'm assuming the guides and the stem seals are gone in it. The guides are a little bit tappety, or it is a little bit tappety I should say. I have this Virgin Bore 351 engine here, and I'm going to swap them round. I know I should put the numbers correct engine back. I'm going to take this out, stick it on the engine stand, do a bit of work on it. I probably will put it back, just because it's the right one for the car. But I just want to swap them over at some stage in the future. Certainly not yet. I've got my hands full with this bloody thing. All things considered, it doesn't look bad under here. I do have to do a bit of work to it though. Put stabiliser bushes and tie rods, all sorts of stuff on this car just to keep it roadworthy. But I put ball joints in it too, upper ball joints. I think it was still running on the original ones. Going to do a couple of tests on this old engine, just to ascertain the condition of it. I'm going to take the air cleaner off for now. Good thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these parts on here are quite brittle because they're very old. The air cleaner element's not. I changed the air cleaner element not that long ago. And so we want to do a compression test. Now, these leads, everything's quite old on here. I haven't changed the leads in a long time. I haven't done the plugs in a long time either. It's worth, when you take these off, to take extra care and just to twist the boot on the spark plug first, just to release it from that porcelain insulator, and then pull it off like you would pull a power point out by the actual top. And we'll take the plugs out. I'm ashamed to say, I'll give this car an oil change and everything as well. Hang on, I'm having trouble with this one. There we go. I'm ashamed to say I haven't done plugs in this for probably 10 years. So we'll give it a compression test. The engine's supposed to be warm when we do a compression test. The other thing we're supposed to do while we're cranking, we'll disconnect the coil, the power from the coil, so the thing won't throw a spark, because this does generate quite a lot of voltage. I'll disconnect both sides just to safeguard it. You're supposed to have the throttle wide open to let as much air in as possible. I'm not going to do that. There's only me here, the kids are inside and they won't come out. So all I'm looking for is variation between the cylinders. So whether the throttle's closed or not, that should be the same, or it shouldn't matter. So we'll just press on and we'll take the plugs out. The other thing to be careful of is this heat riser tube here. The original paper covered stuff you have to be extremely careful with, because it'll basically just unravel and spiral out of control when you take it off. They're quite expensive these. I think this was about $15. I'm just going to try and manipulate it down, and then I'll take this off. It just gives me a bit better access to number one plug. XD Falcons, like a lot of Fords of the era, are still largely Imperial. There is a mixture of metric and Imperial on this engine, or on this car. So I'm just going to take this off. It's just a 5/16 coarse thread bolt. Most of these air cleaners just advertise they're missing this sort of snorkel arrangement. There we go. I could probably even take that off now. Just gently does it. There we go. And put it somewhere safe. And you can see, like the original ones, this is just an aluminium woven or sort of spun thing, and if you compress it, it's wrecked. And stretching it, there's the end of it there where it's sort of wound in and stops. So we'll put that to one side. And now we'll start taking plugs out. Pain the neck on it, Cleveland. Another thing that's very important to do, before we take the plugs out, just to blow a bit of compressed air around them, just on the off chance when you take them out nothing drops into the cylinder bores. I've covered the carburetor air horn, and I'm just going to go around. Just got to make sure if you slip off like this power steering reservoir, that'll be brittle by now. Just got to watch very carefully that if I come off the plug, I don't start breaking or shorting stuff out, particularly around the alternator on number 1. Also, this car's still got its engine lift hooks, and a lot of people leave these off for access, but I think it looks nicer leaving those sorts of things on. It's sort of more original, and that actually looks really good. It's got a bit of oil burnt deposits on it, but otherwise it doesn't look too bad at all. Another thing you should do when replacing plugs is just put a bit of copper grease on there. I remember doing these. This would be back to 2004 or so, and I had hell's on trouble getting them out because I'd left it too long before I replaced them. A bit of copper grease on there just means that they'll always be easily removable. Because these XDs haven't really achieved full classic status yet, there's a limited amount of information about them, and one of the things I've always been curious about, most of them have these anodized nuts here, but they've got these bolts along here, bolts and nuts along here. And I asked one bloke and he said it's bracing, and only the original V8 cars had these, but I saw an XE ESP that didn't have them. Maybe it's the early V8 cars that did. I don't really know. It reminds me when I was at White Horse Motors, I had to do a plugs on a V12 Jag. And the plugs on a V12 Jag took, I think Jag allowed 5.5 hours. I had to take all the fuel rail and air conditioning off, and the plugs are sort of down here, 12 of them. So this is a lot easier actually. I'm just whinging because I don't like doing it in the car. I much prefer doing this sort of thing out of the car. Another thing you can do, if you've got substandard tools like me and you've lost a little rubber piece that goes in there that hangs onto the plug, you can just use a piece of hose. This is just power booster hose. You can sort of slip it over the end of the plug and just unscrew it. That way you won't drop the plug. We used to do that at Toyota. On the twin cam engines that have the plug buried right down the bottom, you can just pull the plug out like that. It makes things a lot easier. Now this is the old compression test. I've had this thing for years. It's got a little button on the side, which they do. I don't like the push-in type. This is a screw-in type. It's got 2 different threads on it. Not a bad idea just to put a bit of grease around here, just to seal against the side of the plug hole, and that way it keeps you free. You can do it when you're working alone like I am at the moment. This is an old one, a very old one. I've had this, well, I think I bought it in the late 80s. Doesn't matter if it's not all that accurate, but it's going to tell me, no matter how accurate it is or not, it's going to tell me the variation between the cylinders, which is what I'm interested in. So number 1, we've got 125. Bit low, but better than nothing. Oh, 160. So in all we have a pretty concerning result. The lowest compression was 110. 4 and 8 both have 110 in them. And the highest of course was number 2 at 160. That's 50 psi difference. Now that's not great. The maximum you want is sort of 10%. So on 160, sort of 145 around there is probably acceptable. But even then, I like seeing them a bit less than that. Now what we can do a wet test, which means putting a couple of squirts in the cylinders. And what that'll do is it'll seal around the rings. Now that dramatically raises compression. It means the rings are worn. And if it doesn't change it much, it means there's a problem in the cylinder heads. So I'm going to leave it there. I've got to get some new plugs for it. I'll put them in, take it around the block, get it nice and warm. And I'll give it a bit of a rev too. Last time I really put my foot down, and this was probably about 5 years ago, so I don't know what's going to be there in terms of carbon inside the engine around the valves and this sort of stuff. Just doing an oil change on the XD there. This is the old oil filter. I've already put the new one on. Good idea to make sure to physically sight that this seal's come off and have a look at the block too, just to make sure there's nothing there, because these do stick to the block. And just use a little bit of oil here on the new seal just to lubricate it so it'll bed down nicely. I always tighten them just by hand. That way they seal well, and when it comes time to take them off with a filter wrench, they come off. If you tighten them up with the wrench, you never get the things off. Another thing is always change the sun plug washer. This is an aluminium type. The original Ford ones are plastic like that. They're inclined to split. They're not very good. They do compress quite well, but I prefer aluminium ones because they seem to compress better. These are like the Toyota ones. Fibre washers I don't like much. I always use the aluminium ones. The other type, of course, is a copper collapsible one, which I've got a few of those, but I've got these, so I'll just use that. This oil doesn't look dirty at all, actually. It's the car hasn't done many Ks since the last time I had an oil change, but it's still a good idea to change it every year, just on account of condensation contaminating it. So again, installing plugs, I'm just using a piece of hose. I replaced the rocker cover gaskets about 18 months ago. I'm just going to run around here with a 7/16. Cork gaskets tend to compress, and it's always a good idea just to re-torque them down, just to prevent any leaks. So I put the compressor on to pump up the tyres. One thing I'm not happy about is that steering coupling down there. I don't know if you can see. Looks a bit oil soaked and so forth. Where is it? Down there. So I might, when the engine comes out, I'm going to have to do some more work. But for now it's back together. The new plugs are in. I've given it a bit of an oil change. We'll just see how it goes. Well, so far so good. It's running quite well. I'm just worried I'm going to run out of petrol. I'm going to run down to the petrol station. Oh, look at that. That's my little baby. Belts are a bit noisy. I put new belts on it not long ago, but I got water on them when I did the service. But look, it's all running all right. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to do much more work on the XW than I do on this for now. But at least she's running a bit better now. Oh, it's happy again, miss.
Hi, Rosie. Hi.
But it's happy now. I was really worried about it. It ran terribly, and now it's running well. And I'm really, really happy with it. What do you reckon, miss? Do you want me to pass it down to you or Charlie?
Charlie might like it. But no, it still holds sentimental value to me. Like you said, my childhood memories, going to the horse.
And mine, we went to Wilson's Promontory in it. We used to go to Yarrawonga in it. Dad used to run me to school in it. He ordered a Fairmont. I remember going for a test drive in it when it was new. And we test drove, actually no, we test drove a Fairmont Gear, the cream one, and Dad ordered a cream Fairmont 4.9, and they jacked the price up. Said, what have you got on the yard? And they said they had this one, which the service manager drove around, and they sold it as a demo for $7,700. And then that was cheaper than buying it retail. I think retail for a 6-cylinder one was $6,600 for a base model, but this had everything he wanted, so he ended up buying this. But it was used as a demo car so that the salesman would take prospective buyers out in it. So it had 4,000 kilometres on the clock when we bought it. It's been with us ever since.
Part of the family.
It is part of the family. Dave Raymaker's had it for 3 months, and so it was still in Dad's name up to 1997, and he died in 98. He died in 1985.
There he goes.
So that's just a little side thing from doing the XW. I had to get this over and just carry out a couple of little repairs on it. Probably not as interesting as doing the resto on the other car, but probably a bit more interesting to me. This car is very, very significant. So thanks for putting up with it. I'll see you later.